On Monday evening, May 19, 2026, the United States military was 1 hour away from bombing Iran. Not metaphorically, not as a bluff. The warships were loaded, the targets were locked, the order was written. Donald Trump had his finger over the button. And then he stopped. Not because he wanted to, not because the military said no, because 3 phone calls came in from Gulf allies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, begging him to hold off for just a few more days, telling him diplomacy was close, telling him a deal might be possible. So Trump posted on Truth Social, told the world he was delaying a strike that, until that moment, nobody outside the White House even knew was planned. And the world exhaled. For about 12 hours, because the very next day, on May 20th, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released a statement that should have stopped every person on this planet cold. They said, and I am giving you the substance of their exact words, that although America and Israel attacked them with the full capabilities of the 2 most expensive armies in the world, Iran did not deploy all of its capacities. And then they said this: if aggression against Iran is repeated, the regional war that had been promised will this time spread far beyond the region. And their crushing blows, in places America cannot even imagine, will bring it to ruin. Far beyond the region, in places you cannot even imagine. Let that settle for a moment, because this is not rhetoric. This is not propaganda for domestic consumption. This is the IRGC, the most powerful military force inside Iran, the organization that now effectively runs the Iranian government, issuing a direct, formal, official warning to the President of the United States and to Israel. We held back. We have more. And if you come again, the war leaves the Middle East. Tonight, we go inside what that warning actually means. What Iran is hiding. Why Trump was 1 hour away from a strike that could have ignited a global crisis. And what the next 72 hours may decide about the future of a conflict that has already reshaped the world economy, killed thousands, displaced millions, and pushed the price of oil to levels that are quietly destroying the finances of ordinary Americans, Europeans, and Canadians right now. To understand the IRGC's warning on May 20th, you have to understand what has happened to Iran over the past 80 days. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, nearly 900 airstrikes in the first 12 hours. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the opening hours. The IRGC commander was killed. The defense minister was killed. Iran's air defenses were systematically dismantled. Its nuclear facilities were struck. Its missile infrastructure took massive damage. 7 countries in the region were drawn into the conflict within 48 hours, as Iran retaliated with missiles and drones across the entire Middle East. The 2-month campaign that followed cost the United States approximately $25 billion. It depleted American munition stockpiles at rates analysts say will take 3 to 5 years to rebuild. And according to the International Energy Agency, it produced the largest oil supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. The Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile choke point through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows every single day, was shut down. Oil surged from $72 a barrel to an intraday peak of $128. Gas prices in America climbed to 4-year highs. Inflation reignited. American household finances absorbed what economists calculated as over $284 per family in additional energy costs, wiping out an entire year of wage gains. And then, a ceasefire. Brokered by Pakistan on April 8th. Fragile, contested, violated repeatedly by both sides. But here is the detail that the IRGC's statement on May 20th forces us to confront directly. The detail that changes everything about how we read this conflict. Despite everything, despite the death of Khamenei, despite the destruction of a large portion of Iran's air defenses and conventional military infrastructure, despite the naval losses, despite the economic devastation of a closed Hormuz Strait, Iran is telling the world it was holding back. 50% of Iran's missile launchers remain intact, according to U.S. intelligence assessments from April 2026. The IRGC Navy retained roughly 50% of its pre-war assets. Iran's underground missile cities, 30 known bases buried 400 to 1,500 feet into granite bedrock in the Zagros and Alborz mountain ranges, connected by over 100 kilometers of tunnels, were largely untouched. The nuclear infrastructure most critical to a weapons program was buried too deep for American bunker busters to reach. A classified intelligence assessment found that the strikes set Iran's nuclear timeline back by less than 6 months. And after Khamenei's death, the succession produced not a moderate, not a reformer, not someone willing to accept American terms, but a hardline IRGC-backed leadership drawn from the most ideologically committed elements of the Islamic Revolution. A new government that, according to one scholar who studied Iran's internal dynamics, did not emerge weakened from the war. It emerged more brutal. This is the Iran that warned Trump on May 20th, an Iran that absorbed the full force of America and Israel's combined military might, and chose not to respond with everything it had. Now ask yourself the question that keeps Western analysts and military planners awake at night. What did it hold back? Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said something in public that received far less attention than it deserved. If the U.S. seeks to resume its unprovoked aggression, he said, Iran has many more surprises in store. The IRGC told the world they will deliver crushing blows in places the enemy cannot even imagine. Iran's army spokesperson Mohammad Akraminia said that during the ceasefire, Iran had used the pause to strengthen its combat capabilities. Used the ceasefire to rearm. And on the same day that the IRGC issued this warning, May 20th, reports emerged that drones from Iraqi territory struck the Baraka nuclear power station in the UAE. Drones that did not come from Iranian soil, but from Iranian-aligned forces in Iraq. The message was precise. Iran's reach is not limited to its own territory. Its network of proxy forces, militia partners, and aligned armed groups across Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon gives it strike capability throughout the entire region, and potentially beyond. Far beyond the region, in places you cannot even imagine. What does that mean? Specifically, intelligence analysts who study IRGC operational doctrine point to several possibilities. Iranian-linked sleeper networks in Europe and North America, documented by Western security services for years, but rarely activated at scale. Cyber attack capabilities targeting Western financial infrastructure, energy grids, and communications networks. Capabilities that the IRGC has been developing and deploying at a low level for over a decade. Missile strikes against U.S. military assets in the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf that were not targeted in the first campaign. Attacks against Israeli infrastructure coordinated with Hezbollah forces in Lebanon, which still retain significant missile stockpiles despite the ongoing Israel-Lebanon conflict. And the targeting of Gulf state energy infrastructure, the oil fields and processing facilities of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, that would send global oil prices to levels that would make the March 2026 surge look modest. This is what Iran has not yet used, and this is why Trump was 1 hour away from bombing Iran on Monday evening, and then stopped. Because the calculation in the White House is not simply military. It is not just a question of whether American airstrikes can damage Iran's remaining missile capacity before Iran responds. It is a question of what Iran's response looks like across all of those theaters simultaneously. It is a question of whether the U.S. military, with depleted munition stockpiles that will take 3 to 5 years to rebuild, can absorb and respond to simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts across the Middle East, the Gulf, and potentially beyond. It is a question of what happens to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, the countries that host the American military bases that are essential to any sustained campaign against Iran, if those countries become direct targets of IRGC retaliation. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE told Trump, directly, personally, urgently, to hold off. Not because they support Iran, but because they understand, with a clarity that comes from geographic proximity, that they will bear the first and heaviest costs of renewed escalation. The UAE's Baraka nuclear power station was already struck by drones on May 20th. Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure has already been targeted in previous rounds of this conflict. These are countries that depend on American protection, but cannot survive being the battlefield of an American-Iranian war. So Trump stopped, 1 hour away, and told the world, on Truth Social, with his characteristic blend of menace and theater, that he had instructed the U.S. military to be prepared to go forward with a full, large-scale assault of Iran on a moment's notice if an acceptable deal is not reached. A moment's notice. And then, the next morning, Trump told reporters something remarkable. He said he is in no hurry to make a deal with Iran. And he said, with the casual confidence of a man who believes he holds all the cards, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would do whatever he wanted him to do. In no hurry. With a military 1 hour away from launching strikes and Iran warning the war goes global if it does. This is the tightrope the world is walking right now, and the drop on either side is not survivable without catastrophic consequences. Let us be very precise about where the negotiations actually stand as of May 22, 2026, because the diplomatic picture is as important as the military one. Pakistan has been mediating between Washington and Tehran. Pakistani Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir traveled to Tehran on Thursday. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi is also engaged in shuttle diplomacy between the two capitals. The framework for talks involves a 14-point Iranian proposal and a 15-point American counterproposal, with the central sticking points being Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile capabilities, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the future of Iran's network of regional proxy forces. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed it has received the latest American views and is reviewing them. Several rounds of communication have taken place through Pakistan. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf, a key negotiator and former IRGC commander, said publicly that he believed obvious and hidden moves by the enemy showed America was preparing new attacks. Trump dismissed Iran's last formal proposal as garbage. Iran's foreign minister said a deal was just inches away, but accused Washington of maximalist demands. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, just 2 weeks ago, had declared Operation Epic Fury concluded and said what America now sought was a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations. A significant retreat from the original 4 war objectives that included full dismantlement of Iran's missile program and severing its proxy network entirely. But since Rubio's statement, Trump's rhetoric has escalated again. A major wave of strikes on a moment's notice, whatever Netanyahu wants to do. The whiplash is not accidental. It is a negotiating tactic. Trump is trying to create maximum pressure and maximum uncertainty simultaneously, to convince Iran that the next strike is genuinely imminent, while leaving the door open just wide enough for a deal to walk through. The problem is that the IRGC has now called the bluff. "We are men of war," they said. "You will see our power on the battlefield, not in hollow statements, not on social media pages." That last line was a direct, unambiguous reference to Trump's Truth Social posts. The IRGC was not just issuing a military warning, it was delivering a message about credibility, about who is speaking from a position of real strength and who is performing strength for an audience. And in the background, a geopolitical alignment is forming that makes this moment more dangerous than any previous point in this conflict. China's President Xi Jinping, in his call with Trump this week, said further hostilities in the Middle East would be inadvisable and called for a comprehensive ceasefire. Xi is scheduled for a summit with Trump and has leverage, economic leverage, trade leverage, the leverage of being Iran's largest oil customer, that he can deploy either to accelerate a deal or to complicate American pressure. China has been stepping up its Iran war diplomacy. Beijing has every incentive to see the Strait of Hormuz reopen. Chinese energy imports depend on it, but also every incentive to see America remain entangled in the Middle East rather than pivoting fully toward the Pacific. Russia, simultaneously, has been watching. A Russia whose own military finances depend on elevated oil prices that the Iran war has helped sustain. A Russia that has explicitly welcomed the ceasefire as an opportunity to push America toward resuming Ukraine negotiations. A Russia that, according to senior Western analysts, has been providing intelligence and diplomatic cover to Tehran throughout this conflict. The U.S. Senate passed a war powers resolution after 8 attempts aimed at restricting Trump's military authority to act against Iran without congressional approval. Democrats are hoping for a House vote. The constitutional constraint is real. It means Trump's threat to strike on a moment's notice faces legal obstacles that did not exist when Operation Epic Fury launched in February. NATO's top commander said publicly he is thinking about how the alliance fits into the Middle East picture. Europe's energy crisis, already severe before the Iran war, has been significantly worsened by the Hormuz closure. The energy shock is now weighing on European economic growth and reigniting inflation across the continent. And in Tehran, a hardline government that emerged from the war more powerful than before, that used the ceasefire to rearm, that controls an intelligence network across the Middle East and potentially beyond. That government is now reviewing America's latest proposal. 2 or 3 days, Trump said. He would give them 2 or 3 more days. The clock is running. Here is what makes this moment genuinely unprecedented. Every previous crisis between America and Iran, every confrontation, every round of sanctions, every proxy conflict, operated within an implicit set of limits. Both sides understood roughly where the lines were. Tehran knew how far it could push before America would respond militarily. Washington understood that Iran would retaliate, but within containable boundaries. The IRGC's statement on May 20, 2026, explicitly rejected those limits. They said the next round goes beyond the region. They said they will strike in places the enemy cannot imagine. They used the ceasefire to rebuild, and they said, with the cold precision of an organization that has had 80 days to study American military behavior and identify every vulnerability, that they did not show everything they had. Trump has a military loaded to the brim, in his own words. Iran has capacities it has not yet deployed, in its own words. 1 hour was all that separated a strike on Monday. 2 or 3 days separate whatever comes next. Pakistan is flying between Tehran and Washington. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are begging for restraint. China is calling for a comprehensive ceasefire. Russia is watching oil prices. Europe is watching inflation. And the U.S. Senate is trying to constrain a president who has already proven he will launch strikes with no warning and no prior public indication. The IRGC warned Trump, "Attack us again and the war goes global." America had 1 hour to decide. It stopped. This time. The question that the world is now living inside, the question that will be answered in the next 48 to 72 hours, is whether 1 hour was a pause or a turning point. Whether the deal that Pakistan is carrying between capitals will be enough to pull both sides back from a threshold that, once crossed, may not have a return path. Because when the IRGC says far beyond the region, they are not describing a threat they invented for this statement. They are describing a capability they have spent decades building. A capability they chose not to use when America killed their supreme leader, destroyed their air defenses, and struck their nuclear facilities. They chose not to use it then. The only question left is what happens to that choice if Trump's 2 or 3 days run out.